When you think about having to outline your book idea, would you prefer to just attempt to boil the ocean instead? If so, you are not alone. Outlining your book is probably the most tedious and exhausting part of the writing process. And most people get frustrated before they even begin, which makes you become stagnant and stuck in moving forward with the book writing process. Because without a thorough outline, it makes it difficult to show up and actually be able to write it. So what I want to talk about today is what's called the 3-act structure that basically I love to take into the book writing process because it helps you to take that big, broad vision that you have for your book and break it into bite-sized chunks so that the writing process becomes a lot easier. The 3-act structure was coined by, I believe, Aristotle, but I love the concept of the 3-act structure. Most people use it for like movies or for fiction books, but it can be used for literally any type of book. And it's a great way to really take that big elephant-sized picture or vision or goal that you have for your book and break it into more manageable bites and chunks. You know, the old saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. That's pretty much how you actually write a book. So let's break down the 3-act structure. So the way the 3-act structure works is you have 3 different acts. So act 1 is the setup. Act 2 is the confrontation or the conflict. And then act 3 is the conclusion, okay? So the way that I break it down is I always take my big picture that I have, the big vision that I have for my book, and then I identify an objective. So when people read your book, what is the number one thing that you want them to walk away with? And this works for literally any book. I hear people all the time, they're like, well, I'm writing a memoir. Like, what does it mean? Well, you want them to know that maybe they can become a better leader despite what they go through. Or maybe you want them to know that they can relate to what you went through in your own book and your story that you're sharing with them. But that's also something that they can heal from or move forward from as well. But you got to have an objective in order for the 3-act structure to work. So basically, what is that one thing that you want your readers to take away when they are finished and completed with your book? If they were bragging to someone or telling someone about it, what would their takeaway need to be? So this may mean like the takeaway or the objective is I want them to know that entertainment can be fun. I want them to know that they can fit yoga into a busy schedule. I want them to know that they can recover their finances after foreclosure. I want them to know that they do have the skills to be a leader buried within them. And, you know, this book helped to pull it out. Whatever the objective is, I want you to keep that in mind because that is how you're going to base the 3 acts. So once you have that big objective, now we move into the setup, which is act 1. Okay. So the setup is really setting that foundation for the book, okay? Letting the reader know what to expect, really just creating that thorough intro that builds into the next act, the next stage, which is the confrontation or conflict stage. So in fiction books, the setup is where you're telling the storyline, like kind of introducing, bringing it forward, making it make sense. And in nonfiction books, that's where you're setting the tone. Like, this is kind of what we're going to talk about. This is what the focus is. This is what you can expect, that sort of thing. In memoirs or autobiographies, and really any nonfiction book, it's a great place to introduce yourself and show who you are. So for me, I find it as a great opportunity to kind of weave in my expertise or to really highlight who I am and stepping into that authority. So for example, in my book, Survive Your Split, I talk about healing after divorce, right? And finding happiness after divorce. But in the beginning, I talked about, hey, I am a divorcee. And from my own experience, I learned this, and this is why I'm teaching this. So it's letting them know that I actually know what I'm talking about. So the setup phase is probably the most important phase because you could have the greatest content in the world in the rest of your book, but if you don't really set that great foundation, if you don't really set the tone for the book and you don't really hook or draw them in and let them understand why they need to continue and read the book, it's going to be difficult to keep them engaged. It's going to be difficult to make sure that they don't put the book down. It's going to be difficult to continue to move forward and bring them along with you for the rest of the ride of the book. So with the setup, make sure you really set that tone, hook them in, entice them, and bring them in, but make the setup really exciting and engaging no matter what type of book you're writing. Then you move into phase 2, which is the confrontation phase. So this is where if you're doing a fiction book, you're taking that storyline that you set out, and that's where everything, all the crap hits the fan, right? Everything changes. The storyline goes berserk. Everything changes, right? That's the confrontation. That's the conflict. That's the climax of the book, okay? That's what phase 2 is for a fiction book. For a nonfiction book, I look at the confrontation phase as you set the tone in the beginning, but this is where you're instilling the new information. This is where the bulk of the material goes. So for example, if you're writing a book on how to incorporate yoga on a busy schedule and how to take care of yourself on a busy schedule, you're setting the tone of like, yes, I can relate to you that we're all busy. And yes, this is the premise of why yoga is important. But in the next section, the second phase, you're really identifying how they can do it. This is when you're giving not just information, but transformation, because people can Google information, but what they really want is transformation. So you're confronting their limiting beliefs or their previous beliefs and instilling the new values and beliefs and takeaways that you want them to have after reading your book. This has really pretty much the bulk of the content for most books. So you want to make sure that you are approaching this phase most appropriately. Finally, now we move into phase 3, which is the resolution, where you should bring some sort of like peace or catharsis or wrap up or resolution or close to the climax, the conflict, and the confrontation that all happened in phase 2. So basically, if you're writing a fiction book, this is where you wrap it up and bring the story to an end and kind of set the tone for how it's going to end, or maybe into your next book. If you're writing a nonfiction book, this is where you really wrap it up and you let your audience and your readers know what to do with the information. The biggest mistake that I see a lot of writers and authors make is they don't tell their audience what to do with the information. They give a ton of information and transformational tools and a ton inside of the book, but then the audience walks away and doesn't know the next steps. So do you want them to read your next book, your next follow-up book? Do you want them to connect with you because you're a consultant or a coach outside of this? Do you want them to take this and apply it in their life? Do you want them to take this and reflect on it? What are the next steps that you would like your reader to do with the information that you shared within your book? The reason that I find the final phase to be really important is because it's usually the last thing that your readers will remember. So you also want to make sure that it's really strong as well, and that you close out so that your readers walk away again with that catharsis, with that peace, knowing what that next step is and feeling just complete, like they made the right decision by picking up this book. So as we go back to the beginning of that big elephant-sized vision that you have for your book, remember, you think of the objective first, then you walk through that setup. So what kind of things would fall under the setup? Then you move through the confrontation or the conflict phase. What sort of things would fall under the conflict or the confrontation phase? And then you move to the wrap-up, the conclusion, and what sort of things would fall under the resolution phase for your audience. And so this is a great way, because once you do the 3-act structure, you've now taken this big image and vision that you've had. You've given yourself one objective and then 3 structural steps that you can follow to start moving forward with your writing. If you're looking for additional tools to take it even a step farther, and you're like, okay, I have this idea, I can see where you're going, but I really want to dive in and I want to take it to that next step. I have this great idea, and if only I could turn it into an outline and I could follow it, that would be great. Well, guess what? You're in luck. I decided to pull back the curtains and allow my footprints to become your blueprints. There was a point in my life where I had so many ideas for books. In fact, I sat on a book idea for over a decade. Not because I was lazy, not because I didn't have time, but because I had absolutely no clue how to begin or where to begin. And so that's why I've decided to offer you an opportunity to join me in my Outline Sanity training. With the Outline Sanity training, you're going to learn how to take your big vision, your big idea, and break it down into bite-sized chunks and create a thorough outline that becomes a blueprint that you can follow, so that writing is no longer insane or crazy, but dare I say, it becomes exciting. The best part is you can make this happen in an hour. So basically that idea, that book idea that you've been sitting on for months or weeks or even years, can already be planned out within an hour, and before you know it, you'll be on the path to actually writing it. And forgot to mention, I actually give you writer's hacks and writer's habits so that writing becomes a part of your lifestyle and no longer something that you resent or get frustrated with, no matter how long it's been since you've been writing. So if you're sold and you're like, yes, Dr. Nicole, yeah, I want in, I'm ready to take this idea and turn it into an outline so that I can in turn turn this into a published masterpiece, then use the link below to sign up now. And I cannot wait to see you on the inside, because this is getting ready to change the way you think about book writing. Bye, guys.